Good morning and welcome into the number one Group of Five football podcast in the world. This is the Group of Five guys. If you're new here, if it's your first time checking us out, we are the voice for the Group of Five football programs, the voice that the mainstream sports media has not, will not, and has never been for these Group of Five football programs. We need your help to do that. We need you to follow us on all the social media platforms at Group of Five Guys. Go to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your best podcasts. Subscribe to the channel. Give us a 5-star rating and a review. Most importantly, tell your family and friends all about us. On this Wednesday morning, we talk about the American. We're going to give you predictions, dark horses, tell you if any of these teams got a shot at the CFP, and plenty more. Hope you enjoy the show. Have you had it from somebody born and raised in Lafayette, Louisiana, at a tailgate? Doubt it.
I said Michael Pratt has got to show up and play, and boy did he. 394 yards, 4 touchdowns, 48 rushing yards on the ground, and another touchdown.
Projected getting drafted between the first and third round, that's incredible. The wide receivers are absolutely stacked for the Group of Five.
Yeah, I really appreciate you do for the Group of Five programs, and I think it's great. I think we should get more of this, but you guys are on the forefront of this. And
I'm thankful for this. I'm glad that you're talking about the Group of Five because I think they get overlooked.
But it's a ton of fun to watch a guy go to the NFL from a Nevada or a Colorado State or a Middle Tennessee or an App State, and fans follow that kid.
Well, Jeff, good morning, sir. How the hell are you?
Good morning. It's beautiful Wednesday morning here in Christiana, Tennessee. Got my coffee right here, brewed, ready to rock and roll. Big day today, the American Conference.
I don't know if you noticed my new to-go coffee.
Oh, I like it. The old fins.
How about the?
You know, it'd be
my
real
wife sent
tight
me
is
to the
if it had
TJ.
a Ray Finkel, like it was like a Ray Finkel jersey.
That'd be tight. I do have a Ray Finkel jersey.
I know you do.
Yeah.
You have a
so I
Pitbull
got that at the
Miami jersey? That's the real question.
Huh?
So do you have a Pitbull Miami jersey?
No, not yet, honestly. But if Coach Mack, when we had him on last, said we were going to get some Miami Vice gear, and
that'd be sick.
haven't seen it. But if we could make a quick order change and include some Pitbull stuff, I'd be glad to have it. So let's go. Let's run down the structure of this thing. And if you missed Monday and Tuesday, we did Conference USA on Monday. We did, of course, Maction on Tuesday. We had Alex Shear join us. Couple really good shows, and we're posting everything on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So just make sure you go check those out. Hit the like button, leave a comment, give us your thoughts on that. So we're going to run through these. We're going to give you favorites for each conference. We're going to give you contenders, sleepers, player of the year, underrated player, most important games, and then of course we're going to pick a winner. But we're going to make sure we hit every single team. So that's the big thing on this. We know there's 60 plus teams in the Group of Five. We know that's the reason we wanted to do shows more often. We want to make sure we hit every single team, make sure all these players and coaches get the love and recognition that they deserve. Now, you may have noticed it is just Jeff and I this morning. Tip's got an opportunity at his real job. Unfortunately, this does not pay the bills just yet. So he's got an opportunity at his real job that he really can't pass up at the moment. So it's just going to require a lot of time and effort. So he's going to go ahead and do that. Make sure he takes care of his family first. So Tip will be back on, at times during the season. So we'll be fired up to get him back on, because Jeff and I are very emotional when we talk about these picks.
We are.
We get very. That's why I've been picking the same teams every year for the past couple of years, because I'm rooting for them. But we're going to try to be rational. We're going to try to give you stats, data, all of that stuff. But I'll tell you what, Jeff, we have had in all the conferences, really, we've had all the quarterbacks starting to get announced this week. Week 1 next week, they're getting announced. I don't think, do we know still for the wave of Tulane? Who's going to play quarterback?
No, I don't think we do. And Coach Sumrall came out the other day and said very likely all three of them are going to play in their opener. Now he doesn't see playing all three the entire season, but he said he could see a situation where throughout the season you might see all three guys. So I don't necessarily know exactly what that means. I don't know if, we thought Ty Thompson coming in, being super athletic, gives that offense a different dynamic. Kai Horton is a returner from last year and played very well in his spots, almost beat Ole Miss. And then you got the young Darian Mensah, who's been making a lot of noise at camp. So I don't, we'll get into it more when we get into that team on this preview, but it's a QB battle down there. Worries me a little bit because I've been high on the wave. But I wouldn't put it past Sumrall to be playing some psychological games, trying to push some guys and really figure it out.
Yeah, they may know a lot more internally. Well, I'm sure they do know more internally. But you're seeing a lot of them. You saw Georgia Southern had a three-way battle, just announced their guy. You saw Boise State was probably the most I guess controversial, going with Maddox Madsen and not the 5-star recruit. But you gotta, here's the thing, man. You gotta give it to these coaches. It's a brutal job, and they know what the fans want, right? I mean, the Tulane fans, surely they had Ty Thompson transferring and they got all excited. And so they're expecting him to be the guy. And there's a couple things that could go. They may just not get the system. They may not be as, quite as good as we thought, or the other guys just, there's a lot of variables to this thing, especially at quarterback.
Yeah.
But we'll be interested to see. And then one thing I know for sure is there is not a coach in the land that's not going to play the best guy, or at least attempt to play the best guy. Or, we always say if you got two quarterbacks, you got no quarterbacks, right? But
what do we say about three quarterbacks?
I don't know what that means. I was curious of what your thought was on that for a quarterback. I don't know. I think that means I don't know what it means.
Yeah, I mean, here and you kind of alluded to it, and I can't wait till tomorrow to do my deep dive on Boise State and that whole situation, because the fan base has seemed like they've been up in arms because the former 5-star is not pronounced the starter, but nobody sees these guys more than their coaching staff and their head coach. So, if it's not the guy that you wanted, how many times have you seen them in camp? Once, maybe. So if, I'm using Boise as an example, Danielson doesn't go with Nelson. He goes with Madsen. If you don't like that pick and you think that Spencer Danielson, your head coach, is wrong, then you got bigger problems because you don't trust your head coach. You know what I mean? Like, you got to trust the guy that sees him day in and day out, not only on the field, but in the locker room. His aura amongst the team, like the position of quarterback is so much more than, and I wish I would have pulled the clip because Tom Brady was talking with Stephen A. Smith. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, but he goes into what, how the NFL is and how quarterbacks are. And he just, I don't think I've heard it better said about what a quarterback is in its entirety than that. I'll try and clip it and maybe play it tomorrow, but, yeah, it's just so much more than being able to throw on the field and run. It's being a leader of men, being the guy in the locker room that everyone looks to and turns to. It's so much more than just what you do on the field.
Yeah, 100%. And you hit it spot on. Like nobody's seeing them in the film room. Nobody else is seeing them in the locker room. So those are things, like you said, especially at quarterback, that matter a lot. And you may have went to the spring game or went to a scrimmage on a Saturday, and one guy throws a pick and one guy throws a deep ball, and you think he's the better guy, but maybe the interception that was thrown was the receiver's fault, or maybe there was something that went on, and you don't know that. Most people don't know that. A lot of times, even if you're watching on TV and the announcers don't realize something like that happened with that. So there's so many variables, but I am surprised we've not seen some of these announcements, especially at Tulane. We are starting to see them, so maybe, but I think you're right. Summerall's got a little bit of, He's got a little bit of that Saban to him where he's probably doing one thing in public and another thing with the
Mhm.
team. Saban always used to do that. If the team won by 100, he would get in the media and act like they were terrible. And then if they barely won a tight game and the media was crushing them, he'd go out there and roast the media. So I think Summerall's got a lot of that. He's very good at um, keeping his guys where he wants them, not letting them get too high, too low, and all that stuff. But let's talk about these tiers, Jeff.
So
In the favorite tier, I want to start with who I think is every conference has the one team I think that's the clear favorite. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm picking them to win, but I think Memphis. I think with what Memphis returned, I think with Seth Hennigan being such a veteran at this point, I think with Rock Taylor, Demir Blankumsey, only thing they had to replace a little bit on the O line, which was really really good last year. Now that O line with Blake Watson, that running game was really good, so they do need to replace that. But it's still a veteran group. 4 out of 5 starters on the O line are seniors, um, and like I said, I think Hennigan. We saw him a little bit last year. We thought he was going to take a huge leap. He took a big step, I think. And I think this year, I mean, you've got a chance. You've got a chance to go all the way. You know what I mean? You got a chance to make the playoff. You got a chance to do huge things at Memphis this year. And I think a lot of it falls on Hennigan's shoulders.
yeah, I agree. And Hennigan almost 4,000 yards last year, 28 touchdowns passing, had 9 interceptions, another 4 on the ground. He's going to be, where this offense starts and stops. We saw him against Boise at Memphis last year, and that first half was a little shaky, and then he turns
We
on
thought
the
he was
second
hurt,
half.
Jeff.
Yeah. So, I'm looking from him to make the jump, to put himself playing wise week in and week out in the top tier of not just the group of 5, but of college football. And if he can do that, then sky's the limit for this team. And this team is very high on the list, probably should be the representative in the college football playoff. I mean, this receiver room, if you look at it from top to bottom, is not only probably the best room in the group of 5, possibly top 5 in the country. You mentioned Rock Taylor, you mentioned Blankumsey. Kobe Drake is a great possession receiver, runs great routes, strong hands. He also, returns punts and kicks. And then Jair Shorter transfers in from Auburn. But before Auburn, he was injured there. He was at North Texas. And when he was his last year at North Texas, kid averaged 27.2 yards per reception. So, that's their 4th, 5th guy on the depth chart in that room. And they're going to go 3, 4, sometimes 5 wide. So, and then you get the transfer Mario Anderson from South Carolina at running back. You talked about their O-line. This offense, top to bottom, is probably loaded more than any offense in the group of 5. So it's up to Hennigan to be the guy, run it, manage it, play point guard. That's literally all he has to do. And it's harder than I'm making it sound. Like, you got to be able to get out of good plays or bad plays into good plays. You got to be able to manage guys. I mean, you're not only a leader of men, like, you're a psychologist on the field in the huddle, because we know receivers, they're divas. They go in the tank. You got to be able to get them back up and be ready to play. So, and then if you look at this defense, they have the chance to be extremely good. You get transfers coming in at linebacker, Javante Mackey from Arkansas State. You get Elijah Herring from Tennessee, who led their defense and tackles a year ago. Martin Chandler, he's going to give you the pressure off the edge. You got pieces on this defense to be great. You got to put it all together. And if they can do that, if they can get the defense meshed well, and they'll have time at the beginning of the season to do it, the offense does what it should do. I mean, it's going to be hard to beat this Memphis team.
Yeah, we got a comment here. Matt Hardigan thinks Memphis is going down to Troy in week 2. Now that's a great, all of these favorites, Memphis has that game against Troy. Boise State's got that game down in Statesboro. Those are, okay, don't get upset with me here, Troy fans, but Troy is expected to drop off a little bit. There's a little bit, not a ton. And Memphis is expected to be at the top of the group of 5. Troy might be a top 10, top 5 group of 5 program right now, or team right now. Program, I'd put them higher than that, but team for this year. But what a great opportunity for Memphis to play them. And then, of course, they've got the showdown with Florida State, which
Oh, that's not the showdown I thought you were going to say.
oh, well, we know what that one is. We'll talk when we talk about the most important games of the season. We will talk about the
that's September 28th at the Liberty Bowl. The Blue Raiders are riding into Memphis.
Jeez,
the Blue Raiders are going to ride into Memphis.
No. I'll tell you, man, Memphis. You gotta. We say it all the time amongst ourselves, and we were saying it a bunch when we were at Memphis last year's. When we were in school, and Middle would play Memphis every year, and that was a win. I mean, that was a win. That was one of the 2 wins of our 2-10 season was Memphis. Memphis and FAU, I believe it was. And we beat Memphis every year. No question. That's the only game I got in, the Memphis game. And so you just look at where that program has come, and then unfortunately where we've been, it's been quite frustrating. But you've seen the investment in facilities, you've seen all the things that they've done down there.
And the Liberty Bowl's getting some makeovers too.
Well, yeah, and there's a big talk about a whole entertainment district that they were putting in Memphis, and you got to, man, because I again, no offense, but Memphis is not a great city in my humble opinion. Your tourist attraction of Beale Street is not very good. It's not very entertaining. It's not very safe, probably. I mean, they've tried to make you feel safe by putting every cop in the city down there.
Well, you got to walk through metal detectors too, Sprouse.
You got to walk through a metal detector and get patted down just to walk down the street in Memphis. But now, if they can create a little entertainment, how some of these baseball MLB teams have, you talk like Wrigleyville in Chicago, Ballpark Village in St. Louis, and some of those areas. You do something like that in Memphis, that'd be pretty cool. And I think that would help with I think that would get visiting fans to come and all of that stuff. But yeah, I think they're the clear favorite. I think the other one in the favorite list, I think most people think this is a 2 or 3 team race, but Tulane has got to be there. And to be quite honest, I think the national media thinks Tulane is going to fall off. I think Tulane going from Willie Fritz to John Summerall is very similar to when Liberty went from Hugh Freeze to Jamie Chadwell, where you're like, oh no, coach is leaving. Ooh, hell yeah. we got one even better. And I think that's where Tulane is. You saw what he did in a rebuild at Troy, won the conference immediately and went back to back.
Yeah.
So now you're giving him the keys to a 2024 Cadillac. Look out now.
Yeah, and I had Memphis as the lone favorite in this conference. And the reason why I probably didn't have Tulane in that category and I have him as a contender is mainly because of 2 reasons. One, it's a whole new staff, and it just comes with a lot of change and a lot of question marks. And then the other biggest thing is the quarterback situation. Pratt leaves, and computer was about to die. Pratt leaves. That's a big hit because he was, had started for the last couple of years, a great player. You get Ty Thompson coming in from Oregon. You got Kai Horton coming back, who, like I said earlier, played very well in his time last year, is fully capable, can make the throws, is athletic enough to be effective in the QB run game. Almost beat Ole Miss. They were going toe-to-toe when Pratt was out against Ole Miss last year. And then really in fall camp, Darian Mensah just kind of starts making plays, starts getting some more reps with the ones. And I don't know if Summerall's playing some kind of mind game where he's using Mensah to push these other 2 guys extremely hard to see if one of them pops, or maybe Mensah really is a guy and he's making a ton of plays and he deserves it. Either way, we've gotten to know Coach Summerall really well. I've had him on the show multiple times. It's been some time with him. This guy is one of the most effective leaders. I'll just be sitting there talking to him and I'm ready to go run through a brick wall. So this guy's an incredible motivator. You saw what he did at Troy, and this will probably be the most talented team that he's had. He's been able to bring in guys At the receiver position, you have Mario Williams, who's a dynamic player. Just go turn on the tape. And then you got Keith Brown, who's an incredible talent. He's coming back. Shaz Preston is going to be there. Dante Fleming has made great plays at camp this year. You get your tight end back. And then I think this defense has a chance to be, and this is like a strong statement, the best defense that Summerall's ever had. And if you go back and look at his defenses at Troy, they were absolutely incredible. And it starts up front with Pat Jenkins. The two guys on the inside are nasty. You get Aiden Huntington, who comes over from ULM, who came from Kent State, who had a great season last year. He's never had a supporting cast like this. You can't double all the defensive linemen. There's not enough bodies, right? And then I think one of the most underrated groups that nobody's talking about, and they rival, in my opinion, when you put on the tape and you look at them, is Ty Wise and Matt Salopek, is going to be this duo of Jesus Machado and Tyler Grubbs. Look out for this linebacking core. You're not going to be able to run the ball. If you get through the first level, you're definitely not getting through the second. And then we talked about him in our key players. Caleb Ransaw, I think, is going to be, he's the linchpin to this defense. He comes over from Troy, so he knows the system. He plays that unique position in the system where he's all over. He can blitz, he can cover. Just having him I think is incredibly valuable to this team.
No, I agree. And you guys, everybody knows how much I love Pat Jenkins. And Jim Nagy has been real high on both Mario Williams and Dante Fleming on the other side. And
we forgot. We probably forgot to mention one of the 10 best players on this entire team.
Who are we missing?
Running back.
Oh, the running back.
Makai Hughes.
Yeah. Well, I didn't forget. I was still going here.
Okay, good. My bad.
But I don't have. I mean, yeah. That's all I was just gonna say was I was just gonna rattle off those lists of guys that are gonna be such a problem. But I was gonna really highlight Mario Williams because when I put on his film when I was building the swing set, he's just one of those guys that you get him on a little freaking quick screen, bubble screen, and he's got a chance to go every time he touches the ball, and that's something that you need, those big plays, those big pop plays, and he's more than capable of that. But I'll let you go ahead with Makai Hughes.
His tape speaks for itself. Just throw on the tape. The kid never goes backwards. He's always falling forward. Yeah. The offensive line is very solid. They're going to be able to get pushes. So he's going to do the rest. And then you add in the quarterback run game, which I think they're going to have that they didn't necessarily have design quarterbacks run with Pratt last year. I think it just further opens up. It might take away a couple rushes collectively on this season for Hughes, but I think it's going to open up even more. And in the live chat, which I didn't know this.
I'm reading that.
Yeah, Machado's hurt, so I'm not sure for how long, but appreciate you, Morgan, updating us on that. But let's look at their schedule. I mean, they got a tough slate. They get Kansas State in week 2, Oklahoma on the road in week 3, and then Louisiana's not going to be a pushover after those 2 physical games, and then you got South Florida. So their schedule is tough, but I think they're physically gifted enough to get through it as long as they can stay healthy.
Yeah, that non-conference is good for them, and we're not sure about Oklahoma, but we always talk about it, right? It's manageable though. It's not. They're not playing the Alabama, the Georgia, Ohio State. They're not playing one of those guys. So we'll see how Oklahoma, if they're going to be back to some type of prominence. But Kansas State at home, I mean that's a winnable game. Although Kansas State's going to be, I mean, both of those teams are going to be top 25 teams when they play, and then you never know where South Florida's going to be. And I think, like you said, a lot of people think Louisiana is going to be back over in the Sun Belt. So. I mean, that's a nice first 4 out of 5 games for Tulane. But let's go down to this contender. Well, you had Tulane as a contender. See, I had Tulane up there as one of the favorites, but I had UTSA as the first contender. And can I just take a second to give Jeff Traylor his flowers, as the kids are saying?
Please.
I mean, that guy has had every opportunity to go to a quote unquote bigger school every year. They've been talking about it. The rumors have been swirling, and he's voiced his frustrations, and which are some of the reasons that most of these guys do end up leaving. And he hasn't left, and he stayed, and then he loses a lot of people thought, well, when Frank Harris and these guys are gone, that's going to be his. Nope, he stays and he keeps building it and he keeps staying there. And so I just shout out to the guy. I don't know if he's waiting for like the one job or something, but the fact that he hasn't left and has said like some of the reasons he would leave and stayed is just incredible to me. And he's another one that's a heck of a leader. And UTSA, we'll see. They lose Trey Moore, which, by the way, did you see that clip of Trey Moore down
that
in
was
Texas?
awesome.
They were just asking him about how much better they are at Texas, and to paraphrase, it ain't much different.
It's incredible.
Funny how that guy went from according to ESPN, he was like the 99th best player in the country last year, and then he transferred to Texas and he jumped up to something like 40. So it's weird. It's weird how that happened. Either he improved a ton or he's got a different logo on his helmet, so they bumped him up.
Give me a second. I think I can find that real quick. You can keep talking about UTSA.
And they also lose Cam Alexander to Oregon, so they lose their best two defensive guys to two big time programs. But I think UTSA will still be back. I'm interested to see how they are without Frank Harris. But we shall see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not counting out UTSA. I think Traylor's far too good of a coach, and my camera's wigging out over here. There we go. Yeah, Traylor's far too good of a coach for this program to just fall off. He's proven that he's built a program that's successful. He's been able to get a lot of homegrown talent from the state of Texas, and this running back room, I mean, it's loaded. I mean, loaded with talent. We saw Kavorian Barnes 2 years ago, I think now, in the Conference USA Championship game against North Texas. Mm-hmm. Dude is a playmaker. I mean, he's a rare breed of speed and power. He's not going down, with one guy. And then you add on that room, Rocco Griffin's in there. He's a great talent. They just all pass the eye test when you watch them play. And I think it's going to be a different team from what you're used to. They've always ran the ball, but Frank Harris did a good job of being able to throw it. And they've had incredible wide receivers over the last couple of years, with Zachary Franklin. You get JT Clark back this year. He was hurt all of last year, who, I mean, had a phenomenal 2022 with all that talent in the room as well. So you get him back, he'll be huge. Oscar Cardenas is back. Kid just always seems to be at the right place at the right time at the right moment making plays. And I think this O-line, they got essentially 4 starters coming back. They'll be very, very good. And then I think their defense is going to be real solid. Joe Evans and Brandon Brown on that interior defensive line, a lot of beef. I mean, you're talking both of them over 300 pounds. Ken Robinson in the back end is returning. He had 65 tackles a year ago. I think their linebackers are good. So I don't see why this defense is, they should be a top 3 defense, I think, in this conference when it's all said and done. And then playing at the Alamo Dome. Anytime you have a home game, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was like 47-9 maybe, or something crazy. Their home record of the last several years. I did find that clip actually. Hopefully, I think this should play of Trey Moore, who's talking about him at Texas.
What's good about defensive end, and you already mentioned it with Khalil Mack, it's that no matter where you're at, if you can rush the passer, it's going to jump off tape and it's going to translate. So for Texas to get a guy like you that can rush the passer the way you do, I feel like it's going to be an easy plug-and-play situation. Yeah. Do you feel the same way?
I do feel the same way. I think, my skill set and also the competition, I feel like it translates. I think people don't give the G5 level as much credit as it deserves because, I think, just playing here in the spring and what I've, learned so far, what I've seen on film, I think a lot of disrespect is kind of given to the G5 level. I feel like it deserves more respect than it, is given.
Mm-hmm. I'd kind of agree with you. I don't feel like the drop off is as steep as people try to say. There's some ballers at the G5 level. A lot of guys at smaller schools are just guys that missed the mark barely or maybe a little bit undersized, but they got it in here and they can definitely ball. So I'm with you. I feel like it's People underrate it a little bit too much.
So,
I mean,
Mm.
appreciate you, Trey Moore, just putting on. And he didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
He had every
No.
right, right to be like, nah, it's different over here, like. So good for him.
Well, yeah, and also it's getting to the point now where when is the Power Four going to start developing their own people? I mean, my God, do these? That's one of the arguments we always hear too, right? Is the coaching staffs are so much better. Like, that's not even close to true. Because first of all, the coaches that they're getting were in the group of five typically the year before. But it seems like the group of five coaches are the ones developing these players and building up these players, only for big money to come in and talk to him. But hey, Jeff, talk about the quarterback at UTSA because he's going to wear number 0 or
No, I think he's dedicated to number 2, which is at San Antonio. The numbers 0 through 9 are special, and I believe 0 their area code is 210. It's that those 3 numbers are voted on by the team. And McCown, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, got voted to be number 2. So he's going to be the starter more than likely. He's got the NFL family lineage. He had some time last year. He looked good. Just, as a young guy kind of getting thrown in there, you're going to have mistakes. That's the biggest probably piece to me why UTSA worries me. And it's just a lack of experience at that position. But I think the kid's fully capable. Owen McCown is. And when you have a stable of running backs and an effective run game, it takes the pressure off of you because you should be ahead of the chains in that regard. Play action does wonders when you got a guy like Kavarian Barnes back there. So, and you should have enough talent on the outside to get good matchups and those guys to win. So, interested to watch him and see his development through the season. But I think Owen McCown is fully capable of taking this team where they want to go.
Yeah, I agree. One of the other team I had as a contender, Jeff.
Tell me.
South Florida Bulls. They're back. I think they're back. But I'm gonna be honest with you, Jeff. Actually, I'm the more I dive deeper, the more I become concerned with the South Florida Bulls. And part of it is the front half of their schedule. I think some of the hype for South Florida is because they played Bama so well last year. But the front half of their schedule, I mean, they've got Bama again. They've got Miami, Florida. They've got they got Tulane and Memphis right at the top.
Yeah, so obviously they open with Bethune-Cookman, which that's a nice little warm-up game, but then you go Bama on the road at Bama, on the road at Southern Miss. You get Miami at home, which is nice you get them at home, and that should be a packed game. I think Miami's pretty darn good this year. At least they have the talent to be. So you go that stretch of Bama, Miami, at Tulane on the road. You get Memphis at home. And then your schedule kind of lightens up a little bit. You get UAB at home, Florida Atlantic on the road, Navy, Charlotte, Tulsa, and then finishing at Rice, which might not be as easy as people think to finish that game, but that's a gauntlet, man. That 4-game stretch right there. It's going to be physical.
And my biggest concern about that is I went back and I look at last year, and again, I think we're falling into a little bit of a trap because they played Bama so tight last year, and then they beat Syracuse so badly in the bowl game. But here's the teams that they beat in the regular season last year: FAMU, Rice, Navy, UConn, Temple, and Charlotte. So they didn't beat anybody they weren't supposed to. And they lost to everybody they were supposed to lose to. So, and by the way, I think Charlotte is the only team that they beat by more than by more than 10 or 12 points. So they've got to, here's the deal. Look, Byron Brown is special now. We know this. They've got to protect the guy. He can't be out there just running around trying to win on his own. And so they got to get that fixed up. They got some weapons. They got Sean Atkins. I think South Florida they are what they are, right? They got a lot of talent. Byron Brown is special, and for them to do better than 7-5, Byron Brown's going to have to be special week in and week out.
Yeah. He's got to be consistent for sure. And I think he'll make that jump this year. Alex Golish is an incredible coach. And schematically what he does is he puts pressure on defenses, you know, in certain areas where they are really weak in. And that's what you want to do. And that's why he's a great coach. So I expect their offense to continue to roll. I think their defense is going to be really good. Again, what just worries me is their schedule, because when you have that 4-game schedule, all 4 of those teams are going to be physical. There's the odds of you getting through that stretch not banged up. It's not, you know, it's highly likely that guys get nicked up in those games. So how are you going to be coming out of that? And then, you know, the 2 top teams in the conference are, in our opinion, are Tulane and Memphis. So you're going to have to beat them early right after playing a Bama and Miami. I just think that's a lot to overcome. Not saying they can't, but that's why I'm a little bit less high on them than maybe some other people, is mainly just the way their schedule shakes out.
Yeah, and not only, you know, getting banged up physically, but if you don't win those, or, you know, if you don't split those, now you're coming out with potentially 1-4, 2-5. Yeah. So then how do you rebound? Because then you can't slip the rest of the way.
They got a little Middle Tennessee treatment right there.
That's what I was just going to say. We talk about this with Middle all the time. When you start out the season with just such a gauntlet, it doesn't leave room for error. It doesn't leave room for the, you know, what do we always say? You know, Western Kentucky always ends up losing to somebody they shouldn't lose to at the end of the year. But you can do that if you don't have a schedule like this at the front. If you either schedules play out, we talk about it with Middle all the time, when they'll start out 1-4, but then they'll win 6-7 games in a row, and it's like, well, you know, it would have been a pretty decent season if those games were spread out a little bit, and the fans wouldn't abandon. And that's the other thing for the South Florida fans. If it starts out rough, don't abandon this team, because that schedule's brutal. Nobody, you know, nobody's getting through it. But I do have a guy, Jeff, on the defensive side of the ball for the South Florida Bulls.
Tell me.
That I am high on. Guy started 12 games at TCU last year. Number 0, 6'2", 322, defensive tackle, Doug Blue Eli. Look out for that guy. That's your guy. That's your guy to anchor the middle. And, you know, TCU transfer. Our guy Pat Jenkins was a TCU transfer. So get those guys out of there. Get that. I mean, 6'2", 322 now.
Yeah, that'll be a good measuring stick too when they play Alabama and Miami, to see how he holds up.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Because if he can affect, be a problem for those offensive lines, there ain't gonna be nobody that's gonna be able to deal with them in the American.
Yeah. Now, did you have anybody else as a contender, or did you drop? Are we in the sleeper category now?
I move on to the sleepers.
Who you got? Who's your number one?
My number one sleeper is going to be the Rice Owls.
Big time pick.
So I got, and here's the reason why. For a couple reasons, is EJ Warner coming over from Temple. Kid loves to throw the ball. I mean, he threw it all over the field last year for the other Owls. Did have, he needs to work on his interceptions, but that's going to happen when you throw the ball that much. And they get Dean Connors coming back, who's a phenomenal running back. He had 700 yards rushing last year, another 400 yards receiving. And in the offseason, I read this, was hanging out with his former teammate, Luke McCaffrey, who was hanging out with his older brother, Christian McCaffrey. And Dean Connors has spent some time with one of the NFL greats this offseason, and not just because of their skin tone, and they both play the same position, but Dean Connors reminds me of a Christian McCaffrey, just a guy that can run it. He can catch it out of the backfield. He can make guys miss in open space. So I think he's going to be a great running back this year. Build off of what he did last year. And then when you have EJ Warner as your quarterback, the ability to throw the ball, now you're not so one-dimensional. You can go out there and do a lot of different things. Their tight end is back. Luke McCaffrey's obviously gone, but most of their other veterans, they're coming back, so that room should be fine. I think the defense though has a chance to be one of the better ones in this conference. And if you look at it from a experience perspective, they really didn't have, a lot of losses, not a lot of transfers coming out. And last year they were so close. If you look into their schedule last year, if you remember, they beat Houston. Okay. They only lost to Texas by 27. I know that's like 27's a lot, but if Texas was supposed to be back, like that's closer than you think. And they lost to South Florida, but that was relatively close. It was 42-29. They had a bad one to UConn. They should have won that game. But then the rest of the games, they lost to Tulane by 2. They lost to SMU by 5. UTSA was 20. And then they won the rest, they won all their other games. So I think Rice's defense, returning that experience, I think they're going to be better. And I think they were closer last year than people really give them credit for.
Well, and then it was the year before that one, didn't they start 5 or 6-0, I think? And then their schedule sets up this year where they could be 4-1 before they host UTSA. Now they do have a bit of a tough draw because in the back half of the season they get all the top ones: UTSA, Memphis, South Florida, and Tulane in the back half of the year. But yeah, you guys, I love EJ Warner. I mean, that was one of my eye test guys on a random Wednesday night, Temple versus Rutgers, I think it was. And I'm telling you guys, like, boys, Kurt Warner's kid is on Temple and he's a damn good player. And interesting to see him go to Rice. I think that's a good spot. Isn't it funny though, Jeff, that when like, especially on the skill position, when it's a white guy, the only comparisons we can do are to other white guys. It's wild. I mean, that's even like in the NFL. Like you'll have NFL scouts. Luke McCaffrey reminds me a lot of Wes Welker. Oh, does he? In what way? I mean, it is wild how we are just unable to see past that when it comes to. It's pretty funny. But another team I had as a sleeper, Jeff, we're staying on the Owl train.
Yeah?
FAU. And I keep and here's why, mainly because of their schedule. And again, we say this every year about FAU is they always have guys, right? And Tom Herman has been known to be a great coach to develop the heck out of his guys and to get the best out of his guys, but they don't play Tulane or Memphis. So now when you're looking at this conference and there's no divisions, they might be sitting there with one loss in the conference where Tulane and Memphis got to play each other. They got to play UTSA. They got to, and so you might see some teams beat each other, and FAU could sort of slip their way into a conference championship game just based off of their schedule. That's the main reason I had them as a sleeper, because last year, we weren't real sure, very inconsistent, and then they lost their last 4 games. So I don't know. You just don't. It's weird with them. It's just. You don't know when it's going to click, and you keep thinking it's going to click, and you see them, and they pass the eye test for the most part when you see the guys.
Yeah.
But just that's the main reason I had them as a sleeper, and I think they'll be better than they were a year ago.
Yeah, and they avoid Rice too, which I think is a big piece to their schedule as well. For me, I'm not going to go super deep on them. I'm just not sold on Cam Fancher. Too inconsistent for me with his time at Charlotte. And then they're essentially replacing their entire offensive line. So for me, it's too much to overcome. I think they'll be better mainly because of their schedule. But I'm not yet, going to put them in a contender spot.
Yeah. Did you have anybody else as a sleeper?
I didn't. I just had Rice. I think they're the most. I think they're the closest one to I can really say based off of their schedule being kind of lighter in the front end. They could get hot, make a run, and who knows, they could beat a couple teams and somehow find a way. I don't think anybody else really has that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly hit the rest of these teams in the conference, and then we'll get into some of our picks. ECU, man, is Jake Garcia going to be the guy? That guy's had a very interesting career. I mean, that guy transferred he moved, so, if you remember that there was a Netflix show. The guy moved from California to Valdosta, Georgia during COVID because your great state, Jeff, wouldn't let the kids play. So he moved to my new state to let the kids play. But then he couldn't play because of some kind of weird transfer rule. So then he had to like sit out a year. Then he goes to Miami. He doesn't win that job. He's been transferring a little bit. He finds himself at ECU. Now again, we're seeing this offseason where some of the 4 or 5 stars don't necessarily matter. But I think if he finds a good spot, he can fit in. And I think, and I'm not blaming him for this, especially out of the high school things. But the guy's been just moving. Like he's had life's been getting after him right now, right? And so again, when you talk about what we talked about earlier about quarterbacks with the mental, with being a psychologist and this and that, and it's like, man, if you just got to find a home, man, and hopefully he can find that at ECU. But I don't know if you had anything else on the Pirates.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, they got some really nice pieces on defense. I like Chase Sowell, their receiver, had a nice year last year. He's a big body guy. Yeah, it's going to come down to the quarterback position for me with them, and they have a nice schedule too. But I'm not sure if this is the year that they're going to make the big jump. I still think they might be a year or two away.
Yeah, and then here's a team that I thought I was close to putting them in as a sleeper, and I'm still kind of having them that, and that's Army. I think Army. I am very, very interested to see just this conference as a whole. Now that some of these teams are going to have to play both Army and Navy, you're going to talk about you want to look where the schedules line up, where they have bye weeks, where they're playing these two teams. Because Army, they tried to spread it out a little bit last year, and then a couple games in, the coach was like, "Yeah, no, we ain't doing that. It's not working." So they went back to the option. So interested to see what they do this year. I'm guessing it's going to be they're going to try to incorporate a little bit of both for Army, but they're going to sneak up on some people. They always do now.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think Jeff Munkin's done a pretty good job there. And their schedule, I kind of like how their schedule is, but it comes down to, when Army can run the ball, it helps their defense be effective and they win ball games. And when they cannot run the ball, they're going to lose. So, and that's what you saw last year. But if you look at their schedule up front, their toughest team really in the first 5-6 weeks is FAU. So you get Lehigh, FAU, and Rice. Rice will be another tough one, but then you got Temple, Tulsa, UAB. They can make a run and be 5-1 or 4-2 in that stretch, and then you get into ECU, Air Force, North Texas, Notre Dame late, UTSA. I mean, UTSA is their toughest conference matchup, and then you get the non-conference Navy game at the end. So they were close for me as well as a sleeper, but I just don't think they're there.
Yeah. What about Navy? Navy to me is kind of, unfortunately for them, they've dropped off. I mean, I think Army has gotten better. Air Force has been a 10-win team for a while now, but I think Navy's sort of fallen behind both of them.
Agree.
And then with that, they're falling behind the rest of this conference. They got a new OC. I was reading some stuff. They're going to try to move guys around a little bit, use more motions to try to get the defense out of place. But sometimes when it's not working in that style of place, there's not a whole lot you can really do. I mean, if you remember when we went down and beat Georgia Tech, I remember that game specifically where it was like they're trying to run the option and we had it. I mean, we were just there. The right guys were, because on defense against that offense, if you're in the right spot, you make tackles, don't miss you're going to stop it. But it's so easy to get out of place because of all the fakes and all the motions and all the movement and everybody's everywhere. So if you're in the right place and you can stop it, and then there's nothing they can do offensively.
Yeah. I just think they lack the explosiveness in that offense that they need, and they get off the field, and then all of a sudden your defense is getting crushed in the time of possession.
Yeah. Tulsa, to me, they got one of the best running backs in the conference in Anthony Watkins, but other than that, there's just not much. There's not much working in Tulsa.
Yeah, I mean, I still think they're a couple years away. I like Cardell Williams. I don't think they've announced who's going to be the starter. Him and Kirk Francis both split time last year. I do like their wideout Camden Benjamin. He's a big body kid. I think he's going to have a really nice year this year. I could see him being, second team all conference. And they get some transfers in on the outside as well from North Dakota State and UTEP. But their defense, man, their defense gives up so many points, and I don't really see anybody on the roster that's going to just make a huge difference that's going to flip that narrative. So they're going to be constantly having to outscore people. So I think it's going to be tough for Tulsa.
Speaking of having to outscore people, North Texas, they're sort of like FAU to me. I just keep waiting for the jump. I keep waiting for it all to click. Their defense is just not. They're just not very good, and they're to score a ton of points. They'll probably win some games in shootouts, but their defense can't stop anybody.
Yeah, I do like Eric Morris. You know, he was at Incarnate Word before Kinney was, so he kind of set that track. You know, it's his second year. I think, you know, third, fourth year is where you really see a head coach if he's going to be effective in that program. And he's been great with quarterbacks. They just got crushed in the portal the last couple of years. So having to replace that kind of resets your timeline a little bit. Chandler Morris was at TCU and at Oklahoma for a reason. But he hasn't been able to stay on the field. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. So is he going to be able to be healthy and be ready to go? Because they got a great running back in Ragsdale. He was just kind of got buried on the depth chart the last couple of years. And then hurt his knee last year as well. So I think they got pieces on offense, especially. I think they can score the ball, especially with Eric Morris's offense. Their defense, I do like. Their interior D line is pretty stout. But sometimes when you have an offense that is like this or how it's been in the past and you score a lot of points and you score quickly, now your defense is on the field for a long time and they get tired and they get worn out. And now all of a sudden it's touchdown, 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 touchdown. Whoever has the ball last is going to win. So if that defense can improve and stop some guys, I mean, they'll be middle of the road again.
Yeah. Let's go back to the Owls, Temple Owls. By the way, my kid's soccer team, also the Owls.
Nice.
Kid's playing. He's playing up. He turned 4 on like the day the league started, so they're making him play with the 4 to 6 year olds. So he's gonna have to start. I'm gonna have to start getting him some protein shakes in because when I was that age, I was bigger than looked like it. He's not quite like you could tell which kids are 6. He's 4.
I'm doing that with Nico. I'm putting him on Dom's flag football team this year, so he's playing 2 years up. I told him yesterday, I was like, "Hey, bud, it's like you better know what you're doing. You're not going to get a whole lot of playing time, but you'll get to practice and you get some time at the end." He's like, "So we were out there running routes yesterday, man. He's got the whole route tree. He's got hitch, slant,
that's good,
out, dig, post, go." I was like, "You just got to figure it out."
Yeah,
man.
my young Jace will be like that because I can already see him at he's about to be 2. Like he's already doing stuff that Cam wasn't doing until he was like 3. You know what I mean? Like just climbing on stuff, jumping off of stuff, tackling. They're funny, dude. They try to kick my ass. They try to like Cam will like tackle me and be like tackle you and like start like.
That's funny. That's how Luciano is too. He's doing everything far because he's got 2 older brothers.
Yeah, it's great. But anyway, back to the Owls. Temple, 3 straight 3-9 seasons. They're probably gonna do 3-9 again. They're just trying to. They keep getting crushed in the portal, and then they're having to fill their roster through the portal or through JUCO, and it just hadn't clicked for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see enough talent on this roster to really, make a big run at anything. I think that 3 to 4 win, 4 would be probably on the high end for me.
Yeah. 2 teams that I know you probably are. I don't know. I didn't know if you were going to be high on them or low on them, but UAB and Charlotte, the last 2. What about UAB? I was reading a lot of things. I'm reading these magazines and see this stuff. I think people are just confused with UAB right now. And they're not one of the things I saw was they're not recruiting as well as they should be or need to be in a market like that at a program like UAB. So I don't know what we know their offense will be good. We know their quarterback will be good, but other than that, I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I like Jacob Zeno. I liked him last year. He can throw the ball. And in Trent Dilfer's offense, you're going to throw it. They lost a little bit of their, run game last year. I don't want to say lose it because Jermaine Brown's a phenomenal running back, but the style of offense that they played, it just was different than you've seen, in the previous couple of years where you would have almost like 1,000-yard rusher every year. So they do have Isaiah Jacobs at the running back position, Josh Jacobs' little brother, alongside with Lee Beebe. So like they got a capable room there. Their top receiver's gone. So that concerns me a little bit. The biggest thing with them is I know they're going to score points. Dilfer is an offensive mind, NFL offensive mind. Like I know their offense is going to be fine. Their defense to me gave up far too many points, far too many big plays. So when you're constantly, again, it's just you got to outscore people. And I don't really see a ton of incoming talent that's going to change my mind on that their defense is going to be that much better. So I think UAB will be good. I think they'll win some big games, but I don't see them contending.
Yeah, and then what about Charlotte? Biff Poggi, I mean, they're just
Wait,
flipping
what'd
the
you say?
roster.
We're like watching sausage being made. It's just a horrifying experience.
What an all-time quote that
It's
was,
so good.
But no, he's trying to flip that roster again. It's like he's just going to keep bringing in guys until it works. But I don't know. Supposedly they're going to throw it all over the place this year with Max Brown, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. Didn't necessarily work last year, like you said. So we'll see if it happens again. They get 2 transfer running backs, one from Iowa State, one from Michigan. So I would say that room's probably upgraded. Their offensive line is basically starting from scratch. So that makes me a little nervous. You're going to have to figure it out and figure it out quickly. And Max Brown looks the part physically, but we hadn't seen a lot of him. So I do like, I hate that Justin Olsen left our alma mater because he was a great player. So they get a good receiver in Justin Olsen there. They just got to put all these pieces together, make it fit, and that's going to be Biff Poggi's. It's supposed to be his calling card. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we shall see. Well, let's talk quickly about player of the year. I kind of went obvious on this. Byron Brown, one of 2 players last year now with 3,000 passing yards and 800 rushing yards. Who the other one won the Heisman. So that's what we're dealing with Byron Brown. Like I said, if South Florida is going to take a leap, he's going to have to be special week in and week out.
Yeah, and I'm going pretty obvious here. It's Seth Hennigan. This guy, I think he's going to have over 4,000 yards passing this year. This offense is loaded. If they're going to win this conference and be the college football representative, he has got to be on week in and week out.
What about an underrated or underappreciated guy? I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I talked about him a little bit. Running back for Rice, Dean Connors. I just think that with the addition of E.J. Warner, with what they're returning on that team, I think he's going to be special. I don't think a lot of people are talking about him. And he's a 2-way running back, man. He can run it, he can catch it, get out in space and move.
Jeff, I'm going to go back to Memphis. The area code in Memphis is 901. My most underrated, underappreciated player had 901 yards receiving last year. Yeah, how about that for a stat? I mean, we're talking about Memphis, man. I was hoping he was also from Memphis. He is not. Cincinnati guy, Demir Blankhamsey. And he's also, Rock Taylor's the number 1 guy, so he's sort of gets forgotten in that mix a little bit, but 901 yards, 7 touchdowns, 5 games with at least 1 catch of 40+ yards, and another 5 with at least 1 catch of 20+ yards. So 10 out of 12 games he's a big play guy.
Dude is so fast. You are not catching him, whether it's short in space or he's going vertical over the top. Ain't nobody running with that kid.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Most important conference game. I'm thinking you're going to go the same as me, but maybe not. Thanksgiving Day. Yeah. Memphis at Tulane, New Orleans. I mean, I don't know. In New Orleans, do they eat even turkey, or are they doing some sort of a gumbo? I mean, we might have to spend Thanksgiving on in Uptown, Jeff.
I mean, we might have to. Yeah, I mean that's the game that I had. I think that game is gonna determine the way the championship game is set up. Just because it's the last game of the season. And then the other most important game, I didn't have this on there, but just thinking about it, is when Memphis goes to UTSA in the Alamo Dome. It's a tough place to play. It's like middle of the season, but those 2 games to me are probably the 2 biggest.
Yeah, most important non-conference game. I think this is the biggest opportunity for the American to send somebody to the playoff. That's Memphis going down to Tallahassee and playing Florida State. Now, I already can see if they beat Florida State, I already can see the narrative from ESPN. Well, see, that's why we didn't put Florida State in the playoff last
That's
year. We knew
exactly
they
right.
weren't. That's what we'll get. But I think that's a very important game and honestly, it's very important for Florida State too. They don't want to believe that, but it is.
Yeah. And I'm going to go with a game that we are going to be at, my friend.
Oh,
UTSA at Texas State. I think it's a huge measuring stick for both teams. It's going to tell you very early on how good each of them are. And I think it sets the tone for whoever team wins that game to propel them on a great season.
I cannot wait.
That's going to
that
be awesome.
Game.
It's going to be electric.
I mean, and we know they're already some of the responses on our announcement the fans are already getting after each other a little bit. So that's the most exciting thing about it. All right, Jeff. Well, I hate that I'm doing this, but I'm doing it, and I don't know how it's going to shake out, but I'm just gonna go chalk here. I'm gonna take Memphis. 2 straight weeks they're gonna have to play. I'm gonna take Memphis over Tulane.
See here,
I don't like it though, to be honest. I don't like it.
Yeah. I mean, I think Memphis is the most talented team. I think top to bottom, if they can get their defense figured out, it is going to be very difficult to beat that team.
Sorry, Morgan.
And I could see this scenario happening. And I kind of worked it out. If Memphis beats UTSA in that mid-season matchup, and then Tulane happens to beat Memphis in that last game of the season, and they win the rest of their conference games, you could very well have a 3-team tie at the top. And if you go look at the tiebreaker rules, it'll end up going, if I'm not mistaken, to a computer score of who would be the highest ranked team. And then at that point, it's going to depend on how Tulane did in their non-conference, because that'll be depending on how high they're ranked. Same with UTSA, same with Memphis. I think Memphis in that situation will get in regardless, because I think they'll have one less loss possibly on their record. So I think they'll possibly be higher ranked. So I think Memphis will get in. I think ultimately Tulane gets in. And I think you have a rematch of Tulane and Memphis in the championship game, and the wave is going to roll.
Oh,
winner.
That'll be very similar to the Mountain West from a year ago. Remember, it was Boise State, UNLV, and is it Fresno?
I believe it was Fresno. Was it? I can't remember.
That's really throwing me off.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the wave rolls.
Anyway, all right. Well, we got a couple voicemails, Jeff, on this American Wednesday. You guys, hey, look, especially next week leading into week 1, we're going to be on every morning or Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6 a.m. live. Call, leave those voicemails, 615-900-4286. Give us hot takes, start the trash talk. We got to get this thing ramped up now. It's game. We're 3 days away from kicking off.
Can't wait.
Oh, what we got, Jeff?
Good friend Baker Loy.
Group of 5 guys, Baker Loy. Welcome back for the 2024 football season. Welcome to the jungle that is. I first have to ask, has anyone called for Sean Clark's head yet? It couldn't be me. But with that said, going into this season, I was listening to your show today here about Conference USA. You brought up a point that made me think a little something holistically for the group of 5. Is it better to play big games early in the season or play big games later in the season? Because they say the highest ranked conference champions are the ones that get the best spot in the playoff, and I believe it used to be, the highest ranked group of 5 team was the one who got the bid. So wouldn't that mean that you want to get ranked earlier in the season so that you could move up to the polls and stay on their minds right there, the voter that is? With that said, what Conference USA chose to do, putting those big games later in the season, I feel like that might hinder Liberty or whomever it may be that's got a chance to make the playoff spot there, because it might make them not have more, big wins, big name wins earlier in the season, and therefore not get ranked until later in the year, unless they, rank them for just beating, I guess, lesser teams. But again, they usually take kind of a big win to get you in the rankings. So I feel like that's kind of an interesting element to think about, and wondering your thoughts. Talk soon. Go Ash.
Appreciate it, Baker.
Yeah, I get the point he's coming from, because it would be difficult to jump somebody that late in the year. Like I'm guessing he's talking about with Jack State and Western playing late in the season. Like if you had, I don't know, like if you had somebody ranked a Group of 5 team at 16, and then you get a big win at the end of the year from number 23, like probably not jumping at that point.
Yeah.
But in that particular case, I don't think anybody's looking at a win over Western Kentucky or Jack State in the beginning of the year as anything special. So if they're an 8-9 win team at that point, I think it would look a little bit better.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think it makes, unfortunately, in that case, a whole lot of difference. Best thing you can do is win them all, right, Liberty?
Yeah, that's all you can do.
All
What we got next?
Let's get to our last call, and football season is here.
What's going on, Group of 5 guys?
Yes.
This your dude, Steeple, _PC_51. That's right, I'm back. I know y'all shaking in your boots, but don't worry. I'm not going to come at you guys too hard on this first callback, because I've been kind of busy and had a lot going on. So I haven't really done my homework on a lot of things. But there are some things I do want to stress. Once again, you guys are putting Coastal Carolina in the middle of the pack. And once again, we're going to have to prove you guys wrong. We will be in the top. I guarantee you, we will be in the top. Once again, the coaching staff is outstanding. Defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, head coach. You doubted us 2 years, but had to show you what the real deal was. We're not going to regress on that. But I'm going to tell you who my sleeper is. And not because the quarterback is father is one of my good friends, Southern Mississippi. But I called it last year with Jacksonville State, and I think they're still going to be top. Look out for Southern Miss. Man, it's great to be back on there. I'm going to be a little bit more louder, because now I don't have to be, I don't have to hold back. Shout out to all my guys in App, Louisiana, Texas State, Liberty. I'm back, baby. I'm back.
Oh, man. So good to hear you, Steeple.
Oh, that's great.
It's official now.
Well.
We can kick off the football season.
How is he assuming we're having Coastal in the middle of the pack? We hadn't done a Sun Belt show yet.
I know. Probably just because we didn't have Coastal in the top 25, maybe.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Might have to replay that on Friday when we do our Sun Belt show, too. Depends if we get any other calls. But we've been waiting for Southern Miss, man. We've been waiting for them.
We have been waiting. We were hoping Frank Gore Jr. was going to have some success there as a team success. But that is all we have for you this Wednesday morning. The American Conference will post everything. Make sure you follow us on all the social media platforms at Group of 5 Guys. Go to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your best podcasts. Subscribe to the channel. Go back and check out our MAC preview, our Conference USA preview. Link up with us tomorrow morning for Mountain West preview. And then Friday morning, Steeple, we'll talk about the Chants and we'll talk about the Sun Belt. That's all we got for you guys today. Hope you have a great hump day. Out of here.